Welcome, friends. Today's topic is called the Kingly Mystery. And the Kingly Mystery is one of the chapters in the Bhagavad Gita. It's chapter 9. And what is the Kingly Mystery? Well, briefly, it's life itself. Life with a capital L, which is inclusive of everything. Not just animals or plants, but everything, everything that has a material basis, which Theosophy says is all those kingdoms up to Brahma. How do we learn what is the mystery? How do we discover and solve this mystery? Well, there is a precondition for learning what life is, and it's to set aside, first of all our preconditions, all our pride, prejudice, our sense-based observations, our ideas from education, etc. Because the world has many ideas which are false, many philosophies that are partial truths. So in order to really learn what it is, we have to start fresh. Look at the world with the eyes of a child, if you will. An example of maybe a false idea that is very prevalent is that we only live once. Now, Theosophy says that through the course of our evolution, in the grand scheme of our whole journey into matter and existence, is to perfect ourselves. And as such, it cannot be accomplished in just one life. Another misconception having arisen from religion is that we were born flawed or somehow as sinners or whatever, but this isn't the case. We are, our true inner nature is one with the all, with Krishna, who stands as the self of all beings and who was the one speaking in the reading from the opening remarks as emanating the whole universe as a part of himself, and yet sitteth indifferent. We are that. And Theosophy says that we've forgotten our divine heritage, our divine selves, so we need to rid ourselves of the idea that we're somehow flawed or incapable or whatever. Another misconception is that we were born because our parents decided on having us. That's just a means to an end, so to speak. It's through the desire to incarnate, the thirst for life, and to complete our evolution that we are impelled to be born. And it's not just because our parents decided, it's because there are human beings always in the process of incarnating and reincarnating. So there are egos waiting to be incarnated, there are egos in incarnation now. So if we could understand our own nature, we would see that from that higher point of view of Krishna, we could see that all directions of thought are available to us at all times. No one holds us back. We hold ourselves back. We limit ourselves by our ideas, the ideas that we hold. Therefore, we need to set those aside. So the Kingly Mystery includes more than just the physical realm of existence, which is just one aspect of life. We have to go deeper into our nature to understand the psychic nature, the higher mind, meditation, and all the worlds that can open up for us. And as we do that, as we study our own nature, we come to understand cause and effect and to know how to bring about better and better future results. So there is a power which lies in the essential spiritual basis of every being, the one self. And it only appears to us to be divided among creatures, but in reality, it's not divided at all. It's one. And Mr. Crosby says it is. It's not it was, it will be. It includes all of that, but it always is. It never was not, so to speak. It's the foundation of all, and in it lies the power of unfolding, of evolution, which makes possible the attainment of a full knowledge of life and an understanding of our own true nature. As Mr. Crosby says, each one of us stands in the midst of a great and silent evolution. Each one of us sees many expressions of different beings, those of the same grade as ourselves and beings of grades below us, such as animals, plants, etc. We find relations with other elements, the power of which we do not see, the source of which we do not grasp, yet the effects of which we feel. On every hand we are getting effects from different beings of different grades, each one receiving those effects differently. The beings below us in forms of the mineral, vegetable, and animal world are all working, just as we are working, toward a greater and greater realization of the whole. Sparks of the one spirit, of the one consciousness, they have begun their little lives in forms or bodies by which they may contact others. As they have need for better and better instruments, need for further and further contact, they evolve from within a better instrument, as do we. Such is the whole course of evolution, always from within outwards and always with a tendency to an increasing individuality. From the ocean of life there finally tends to arise divinity. Divinity, he says, is always acquired. It's not an endowment. It doesn't exist of itself. Each one has to see, to learn, to know for himself by his own exertions. Each one has to acquire it for himself. Each one determines his or her own limitations. So what is divinity? We know that we have to exert ourselves to acquire it through this process of evolution. Evolution through the lower kingdoms moves by natural impulse. So it moves along until that state in the man stage, the human stage, where we're really the link between spirit and matter, because we're self-conscious and we can question and always have the power of choice and free will. And it is at that stage that self-induced and self-devised effort is required. So what is divinity? But an all-inclusive knowledge. It's not something that denies any portion of the universe, not any kind of being. It's an intimate knowledge of the ultimate essence of everything in nature. And it's the power to see and know in any direction. So it's omnipresent, it's omnidirectional, it's all-inclusive. And we are capable of attaining this. And different teachers throughout history have brought this same message, that Madame Blavatsky and William Q. Judge, that there are perfected men, that it is possible. And they serve as examples and exemplars to us of what is possible and point to the path to follow. So how do we go about this process? Since thought is the basis of all actions, it is our false ideas in regard to life that bring about wrong action. This is the cause and effect and the karma that we engender from life to life, and thus we meet those results in the present life or in a future life, and they may exhibit themselves as limitation in any area, physical, mental, whatever. So it is for us to work out those results. As difficult as they may be, it is possible. We have thought that we're different because we have different ideas, but we're still one. And it's easy to forget that. All a man can know of divinity or God is what he knows in himself, through himself, and by himself. No one outside of us can say, this is what it is, or this is what it isn't. It has to be something we find from within. The real man, that spark of divinity within each of us, must assert himself, itself, and act in accordance with its own nature, and the responsibility which that oneness of all nature demands. An example of that would be compassion. The law, Theosophy states, the law of laws is compassion. It has to be inclusive of the whole. It can't leave out any part. Therefore, one has to consider and have love and compassion towards all. So man stands where spirit and matter meet, and he's the link between higher beings and those below. And the goal of the kingly mystery is the seeing and knowing and feeling and acting universally, with always the power of choice. In the notes on the Gita, Mr. Judge writes, he's addressing the portion of the opening remarks in the reading where it says, "Unto thee who findeth no fault, I will now make known this most mysterious knowledge, coupled with the realization of it, which having known thou shalt be delivered from evil." Those are the words of Krishna. And these words, Arjuna he's being recognized as one who findeth no fault. In other words, he understands that law rules in everything, and nothing can come to him in good or evil, but that which he himself was the cause. In other words, in finding no fault, Krishna is saying that he's equal-minded. He's not for or against anything, but he is, just considering it with an equal mind. He's not leaving out a portion or excluding anything. Accepting law is a necessary step towards further enlightenment. So the kingly knowledge spoken of by Krishna implies a full identification of the mind, or our thinking powers, with whatever subject or object it may be directed to, which concentration enables the perceiver to cognize all the inherent qualities of the subject or object and know all about its nature. And this is a stage that can be reached through meditation. And Patanjali in his Yoga Aphorism speaks of all the powers that one can arouse and awaken through meditation, and that is the key to opening up realms of higher consciousness and maybe experiencing more intimately that oneness, that bond of unity that we have. And I need a copy of the Gita. Do you have a copy of the Gita? Oh, wait. Yeah, that would work. Sorry. Sorry. Where Krishna speaks and he says, "Unto thee who findeth no fault," etc., this is the royal knowledge, the royal mystery, the most excellent purifier, clearly comprehensible, not opposed to sacred law, easy to perform, and inexhaustible. Here he speaks as the omnipresent spirit, which is in all beings, but he's fully realized it, as have others such as Christ and Buddha. So when Krishna uses the personal pronoun I, when he says, all this universe is pervaded by me in my invisible form, all things exist in me, but I do not exist in them, that I is not the personal pronoun that we think of it, but the self of all. So we could substitute for I the one self. But all this universe is pervaded by me and my invisible form. All things exist in me, but the one self, I, do not exist in them. Nor are all things in me. Behold, this is my divine mystery. So we could substitute for I the one self or the omnipresent spirit. Any other interpretation serves to frustrate a realization of universal brotherhood. Krishna says that all forms of every kind proceed from the one universal source, the one life. The differences arise from their power of perception and expression, hence the innumerable classes of being unfolding from within outwards. So there's as many type of beings as there are possibilities of perception and expression. Thus we see the great differentiation throughout the world of all the different kinds of beings. So when Krishna says, I cause all these beings to evolve again and again, he's talking about the law of cycles. And he means that each period of manifestation is followed by another based on the experience gained. I emanate again and again this whole assemblage of beings, without their will, by the power of the material essence. What does that mean, without their will? That Mr. Crosby suggests that this could be understood that no human being in a body is in a body because he or she has such desired to be, nor does he leave his body because he desires to. But the impelling force of evolution proceeds from and through the inner self, which is why we need to get in touch with that part of ourselves. By the power of the material essence could be understood by considering the statement that spirit and matter are really coexistent and co-eternal. They're two sides of the same coin. By matter is meant primordial substance, from which all differentiations in matter are produced by the conscious actions of beings of different grades. I am as one who sitteth indifferent means that the one self is not involved in any or all forms of manifestation, but remain the spectator, the admonisher, the sustainer, the enjoyer, and also the highest soul. Just as each one may say, I was in a child body and had experiences pertaining to that state, I passed through the changes of body and circumstance up to the present, and I will pass through all changes to come, but I remain the same unchanging identity throughout all conditions. The remainder of the chapter is devoted to presentations of the right understanding of the self, with a capital S, the self of all, not the small s, the personal self, who is, the personality for one life, but the higher, the inner higher mind and the buddhi, the Atma Buddhi Manas, the higher self. So the rest of the chapter is an understanding of the self and its results, as well as the results of a false or imperfect understanding of the self. As we're told in the Voices of Silence, that mind is like a mirror. And what is it mirroring? It's mirroring the soul, hence the need to understand who we are. And it has to begin through the mind, through the process of thought. To think and act for and as the one self of all without self-interest in the results. That's what Krishna is saying by saying he evolves it, but he's not concerned with a particular part. He accepts whatever the results are with equal mindedness, without interest in the results. So we're to try to become unattached to the results of our actions and our thoughts by having a good motive and guiding them and doing our best, and then whether they're received well or not is not, we can't do anything about it, but we can try to maintain equal-mindedness about it and try and understand what those experiences mean, garner, cull the fruit from those experiences, try to determine what they mean. True freedom comes from a renunciation of all self-interest in the fruits of action. And that's one of the greater subjects of the Bhagavad Gita. So the kingly mystery, to sum up, is the mystery of life itself and how we are to come to know life, that we are on the way to consciously realizing our divinity, but that we have to acquire it through the process of thought and meditation, self-induced, self-devised efforts, through the higher self, to open up those centers within us that Mount Blavatsky says are latent and that can be awoken, and those spiritual centers will open and we will have spiritual sight, spiritual hearing, etc. And that we can come to see and know all. And that is the kingly mystery, to see and know all. Okay, thank you. And we'll open it up to questions or comments.
To see and know all, is that to be divine?
Yes.
Okay. Equal-mindedness. Does that mean that you don't take a side either way?
Let me repeat the first question because the microphone's here. The first question was, to see and know all, is that divinity? And the answer was yes. And the second question was, equal-mindedness, does that mean to take a side or not to take a side? This student's understanding means equal-mindedness is not being sort of perturbed one way or the other. Yeah, to be impartial. Impartial, perhaps. One can have one's opinion, and if one feels that a certain course of action is right, then it becomes one's duty, perhaps, to follow through on that. But to be equal-minded as to the results, because we can't control other beings as much as we'd like to sometimes. They're out of our control. We can only control our response and our thought and our motivation, our intention in any action. So it seems that sometimes a side must be taken. Like in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a war going on. And Arjuna says, he throws down his weapons and says, I'm not going to fight. He's not taking a side. And Krishna, the whole dialogue of the Bhagavad Gita is, it's his duty to fight, and why this whole mystery is, and how to sort of navigate it, and why he must fight, why it's his duty to fight, to wage lawful warfare. Yes?
Perhaps I can make a comment.
Yes.
At this stage of our development, we find it very difficult to look at issues from both perspectives, because it is stated that human nature in us lives partially in many of our shapes, and sometimes we don't live in the higher at all. That most of the time the human is a comic person, because we have not developed the higher aspects of our nature, we really live with the intellectual mind, and the other finds it very difficult to influence at this stage. So to look at it impartially means looking at it from opposing viewpoints, and not just from your viewpoint, because depending what sheath you are using, you're looking at it partially, but the other person might be using a different sheath, and they're looking at it from a different viewpoint. So impartiality means that you look at the issue from all sides, and if it is a problem to solve, then you put it on the table and say, and how do we come to an agreement in solving it? That is even-mindedness.
Excellent example. So to try to sum that up, impartiality means looking at a situation from not just our point of view, but from opposing points of view, because we're all on different levels of thought, using different principles or sheaths of our nature, and we might be functioning in one, and another person might be functioning in another. So to try to understand their point of view as well, and to put it on the table and say, how can we solve this? Impartiality.
If every being is striving for individuality or his individuality, how does one get to the point of impartiality?
That's a great question. If every being is striving towards individuality, how do we then get to impartiality?
Can you define individuality first?
Yeah, I guess individuality is the stage of the human being where he or she is capable of the awakening of all the 7 principles. For example, the animals have mind, but it's latent mind. They have instinct. It's not capable of choosing or questioning. Whereas, as was said in the earlier, that we're sort of at that pivotal spot between lower grades of beings and matter and the higher. So at that point, when mind is awakened, we can choose to do something that is selfish, and yet we will suffer the karmic results of that. And they may be unpleasant, and no one would take that choice away from us. No one can. We must have that. So we have to experience individuality in order to progress, to evolving. And even though we become divine, seeing and knowing all, the individuality becomes, how does one say, maybe a part of the whole. It doesn't completely disappear unless one enters the nirvanic state, which is a complete oneness with the all. Otherwise, it is a mystery. It's a higher mystery. We don't totally understand how an individuality can persist through one great period of evolution to another, but it is said that some of the higher beings are able to do so. And the next period of manifestation is based on this one. So the results that are garnered are carried over. Nothing's lost. It's a closed system, so to speak. So individuality is essential, it's crucial, it's the battleground of the mind, and the pathway to awakening the higher principles.
But sometimes I think that the people who are really important and significant, they never try to re-emphasize their own importance. They are in it. And maybe when we are already at the sort of full exploration of our individuality, because there are people who constantly think, what do I wear, what does that person think, how do I look, what did I say? And then those who are very comfortable with themselves, because they already explored that individuality, and now they're sort of at peak of that, and then they can become impartial. Can be one of the ways to actually.
But all of those things that you have listed are actually personality oriented, not individuality. The individuality that is in that book is similar to the one life principle, because in each human being, that one life principle finds expression as a ray from the center of that sun, the spiritual sun. But there is no other way to express it in human terminology. So we call it a ray, but nevertheless it is a spiritual ray of light. If we can imagine it, it is brilliant, and it is electric, and it is magnificent. It's so bright, because he says it is like 1,000 suns shining together. Well, we can't even look at the one sun because it charcoals us. Imagine 1,000 of them together. So the brilliancy ought to give us an inclination that as an electric, the spiritual light that we are. And so that is the identity that we're talking about here. That ray, the essence of which is the same as the rootless root, as well as the root, which is the one life. So I am of the same essence as the root. I'm not separate from it at any place or at any time, anywhere. Kathy said it's omnipresent and omniscient. So am I. But the point is, we identify with the lower principles of our nature, not the higher. And in order to awaken that conscious awareness of who I am, I need to awaken those centers that Kathy was referring to, which are through the thought process in the mind. Pineal gland being the spiritual center, most of the time referred to.
So, if I understand it correctly, that individuality that is either latent within me totally or partially and so forth, is that process, is that opportunity to grow into a perfected being. Once I am a perfected being like a Christ or a Buddha, if I choose to go in that direction, I can also choose to go the other way too, then I'm one with the all, but still identifiable, if you will, but one with the all. I have all the characteristics as the all, I mean, or almost that.
Yes.
That's all we have to do.
That's all you have to do. You have
Get
lived
to
for
it.
18 million years. That's all you have to do.
That's all you have to do.
Yeah.
Put it on a index card and put it in your recipe box. Yes?
There's a statement in the Secret Doctrine where it says that there's an imperishable center in each human being, and that imperishable center is what actually saves each human being, regardless of how we torture the higher self. Would you like to comment on it?
Sure. How are we doing? I can't see. There is an imperishable center within us, and the actions of the human being, if focused in the animal vestures, in desire and personal, trying to further the personality, it can sort of, the words were torture, so to speak, the higher self. And would I like to comment on that? Sure. From the student's point of view, what's coming to mind right now is that we always have that choice, and that it is always a choice. It may not always seem in any particular circumstance that we have a choice, but we choose based on all the available information that we have, which might be limited, and all the sort of karmic weight we're trying to lift ourselves out from under, we make choices the best we can. But it is said that the higher self, the sustainer, the enjoyer, the admonisher, the witness, suffers to the degree that it can't shine through to the lower vestures unless the mind, which is the link, is awakened. And sort of, if one thinks of these principles as lenses, if they aren't focused properly, it can't shine through. Therefore, it, I guess it can't be said to suffer, but so to speak, because it feels it is the oneness of all, and it is aware of everything happening to every being at all times. And because compassion is the law of laws, the higher beings, the Mahatmas, the higher self, it is the embodiment, or it is the essence, is a better word, of compassion. And in that sense, perhaps it suffers. Would you care to add to that?
Well, it really relates to divinity, because if we were not divine, we could find no possibility to become divine, because that imperishable center is divine. It says that the first feeling that is awakened in the human heart is love, compassion, generosity, kindness to all the rest. That at the human stage, this then becomes a conscious effort on the part of humanity to express those, because it's the natural center in each heart. So the divine center is there, and it enables us to have love and compassion, because the first feeling that is awakened in the heart is just that, for the progenitors, because of the imprint, and it can never be eliminated.
So it's said that in the human heart, the first sort of feelings that the human awakens to is love and compassion for others, for the parent or the progenitor, whether that's on the level of incarnation or whether it's on the level of, talking about evolution. When mind was first lit up, it was that love and gratitude and compassion was, Theosophy says, the first feeling the newly awakened being had was for the Manasaputras, which is a Hindu word or a Sanskrit word meaning those who gave a portion of themselves and lit up the mind. And we talked about that in a previous talk on Prometheus, who stole the fire and lit up men's minds, gave them the ability to choose.
So that suggests we might be getting a little outside help too when we're ready to get it, right?
Oh, is it possible to get outside help when we're ready? Yes. Theosophy says that the Mahatmas are ever watching over humanity. We are never alone. That all the time they are emanating beneficent thought and compassion, and that if we tune into that, we can be helped as much as we allow ourselves to be. It's through our limitations of thought that we feel ourselves cut off from that help, that love, that compassion.
By right thinking, we learn to tune into that? Is that what you're saying?
By right thinking, yeah, we can tune into that for sure. By thinking along those same lines, because thought is electromagnetic at higher levels, it's attracted to similar thought. So all beings in the world thinking similarly meet up. So that's an important point that was excellent to raise, is that we can tune into it at any time. We can share it among all others. And by sharing it and living it ourselves, it affects other people. They see a change, or they see something, and maybe it inspires them. I think the Mahatmas and these beings are constantly putting out these ideas, these emanations, and inspiring people in all walks of life, whether artists or writers or engineers or anything, nurses or doctors, that compassion, that ability to inspire others, even to tell a story that illustrates that struggle, could be an inspiration, that was received through the assistance of the Mahatmas, through the higher mind, through thinking about these ideas, being in touch with other minds. We are all one, so it makes sense.
But the other part of that coin is that just thinking about it is not really sufficient, that we have to act like they do, that's the only way that philosophical truth becomes a living power in us, when we not only understand and promulgate it, but also live it. Our actions have to also follow in that direction.
Excellent point. We can't just think about it. Thoughts have to be followed by actions, and it completes the cycle.
And that raises another question, I guess, a comment. Action has to eventually be right action. We have to act to learn, and we're going to make mistakes. But we have to develop discrimination along the way, to the point where we have to act right all the time. Is that kind of?
So acting through right thought comes the right action, and the comment is that we learn from mistakes, but eventually, as was said, the responsibility that the oneness of life demands is that our duty will become clearer to us as to what action is of benefit to the all and that which is not. So it's a gradual process of awakening, but there are, like the Voice of the Silent says, there are portals, there are gates through which we pass that, for us, if we read it, illustrate how these awakenings, sort of steps up the ladder, can happen. But to choose to act selfishly becomes a backwards sort of choice, away from divinity, towards separation, towards a negation of that oneness. So, I can't see it. We still have time. We have time for more questions. Okay.
Now, the process of opening up those spiritual centers that are within us, could you review that again?
Can I review the process of opening up the inner centers? It's been talked about in the Secret Doctrine and various other books, but briefly, it's the process of concentration leading to meditation, becoming one with the subject or object being thought about, to the exclusion of all else, and then one becomes to see and know all about that subject or object. And by doing that, by practicing it, we learn more and more. And it says when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And when one becomes ready for instruction, so to speak, and guidance, where any sort of subtle misstep could be a setback, then the teacher, one's guru, becomes on the scene, and it becomes a mutual pledge between the teacher and the student, and the teacher guides the student, because it becomes at more subtle and subtler levels of thought and matter, and dealing with the very essence of things. So those centers are gradually awakened and opened. And it said those who don't know talk about it as if they know about it, and those who know don't say. But it is a mystery, and it happens at higher levels of initiation into higher wisdom. And there have always been mystery schools that have existed on the earth, Egyptian, Greek, and even others, where there's sort of an intermediate stage where there might be a group of students and a teacher, and then eventually it becomes, I guess, it's talked about in the books as that special relationship where the teacher is sort of like the parent and guides one through those spiritual awakenings, helps to guide our progress.
Is that the role that the Mahatmas...
That's all the student knows.
Is that the role that the Mahatmas play in terms of guiding mankind through?
Is that the job of the Mahatmas, is to guide us?
Is that a role that they play?
Is that a role that they play? Yeah, except they cannot push or pull the student. It's up to the student always to make his or her own exertions. They can but guide, they can but point the way.
Now, we say they, we're referring to the Mahatmas. Are we talking about a level of spiritual beings?
When Mahatmas are referred to, does that mean a level of spiritual being?
Yeah.
Well, there's an infinite number of levels. So there are teachers of various grades and of various sorts. And yeah, it seems one would, learn as one learns mathematics. You can't learn to multiply until you learn to add. So forth and so on, step by step. Yes?
But the first line of defense is our higher self. Because the higher self is the one that slowly raises us from lower levels of consciousness to a higher level of consciousness. Because that divine mind, the higher mind, is divine. It's pure wisdom itself. It looks at ideas directly. So through that process that it described, through the paramitas, as we are trying to purify, because that is what we are really doing. By doing all those things that is prescribed in that little book, Voice of the Silence, which says, Dana, love and charity, and Mr. Judd says, we're not going anywhere without loving one another. It's so very simple when they say it, but when we have to apply it into our daily activities, every single moment of every single day, that's the difficult part. This is on a continuum, that once we assume the position of the higher, that's where the consciousness needs to stay. But in most of us, it is mixed. We're up and down all the time. So this is what we need to come to terms with, that assuming the position of the higher is just that, is just acting from that perspective at all times. That is when it slowly uplifts us. Because, as you said, it cannot be done all at once. It's a very gradual process. And the initiation process is internal. It is not an external process. Because when you go through them, you don't even know it is a state, that you have done it. It is so subtle. So, in that respect, the first line of defense, the inner guru, we cannot know the other until the inner has become
Active.
has become that active process in us that guiding force in us.
Because the higher self in each one is identical
Yeah.
with the guru.
Yeah.
It's not really outside of ourselves.
That's
It's
right.
an excellent point. It's within. And it also guides us. And that's why Mme. Blavatsky says, don't accept just anything I say, test it and check it within yourself, or what anybody else says. Use the powers of discrimination. The more we use them, the more we awaken them. And as this other student said, the process of purifying is really removing the obstacles that are in the way of us knowing that inner light.
And I would like to make it and the Gita that you referred to says this unasked for opportunity is here and now. In ours, the door is open. Have the courage to walk through it. What's the courage? Is to do the fighting. Because that lower mind is not going to let its jurisdiction be given up freely. Because it is used to assuming the position of all, the karmic mind. So to shut that off and open the other path is the necessary action in us. Because it is a conscious effort at first, especially if we are materialistic, we are self-centered, selfish, and everything revolves around us. I'm the center of the world, and everything is revolving around me, and this is, you can observe it around us, this is where we are. But then there is that other element rising up too, that the spirituality, people questioning, asking what is the meaning of life, and moving in that direction is also there.
Yeah,
So
another thought that occurred, that's an excellent point, is that we have to guide our lower nature. We're not just trying to cut it off and throw it out. Remember, this is a closed system. We have to be inclusive of all. So the lower nature needs to be trained. It's like an animal. It needs proper nourishment. It needs exercise. It needs some work. It needs some relaxation. Perhaps think of it that way. I am training my lower nature to be my best friend, not to pull away, bite the hand that feeds it when, one is trying to go through this process of purification. Perhaps it's more helpful to think of it that way. The lower nature is a vehicle. In order to get somewhere distant, you need to get into your car or your airplane or your train. It's a vehicle we need to be on Earth, among others, where we can learn and where we can help each other. So, but it will react if we try to turn our attention elsewhere. It will try and say, "Oh, well, what about me?" And we need to just, you're okay. We're going to focus on this for a while, but take proper care of it too, so to speak. We have to have compassion for it. It's fighting for its life. It's used to being dominant, as was said, but yet it needs to learn its place in the scheme. It needs to be guided from above, not run rampant. This desire and that desire, and go crazy. We know that the excessiveness in any area becomes a problem. We're looking for balance, as the Buddha said, the middle way, equal mindedness, balance.
I was going back to the opening spiritual centers and the concentration, and I was thinking, as you were talking more about these things, that when we speak of concentration, it is actually not the doors through which you enter, maybe in the opening spiritual centers, but it is a tool that you can apply to different situations that will lead you there. And I was thinking, like, basically, when you have that concentration, single-mindedness and things, and you can just be what you're thinking, then you're also training your mind to step outside of what you're not. So if there is a very heated situation, your mind is trained to, instead of engaging, step out and look at it. And that's part of the spirituality when you can embrace the whole situation that is outside of you as not you.
Well
It seems to
said.
be that way, because you are part of the all, and as they're part of you, you are part of them. There's no such thing inside and outside either. It's
But
a
if you
conception
are
that
in it, you are responding to emotions. You have to step out and look at things.
If the
As you
illusion
Lower
of
self.
inner, outer, lower and higher can be used usefully to help, then that illusion is useful. Go ahead and by all means use it. But know at one point that it will be supplanted with a clearer understanding. But yeah, I mean, inner and outer, strictly speaking, is meaningless, but at our stage of evolution and our thought process, it can be a tool, it can be helpful.
Well, I don't think we can go through it. I mean, at our level, the power is in the practice. Right, at our level. So, if you're unable to detach from the experience, then you're unable to use any powers of discrimination or discernment, because you are in it. And so it goes against that whole thing. So it seems to me that you have to, I mean, when I say you, I'm talking about people who are on that path would have to detach or be out of it and have some ability to do that. Otherwise you can't discern and you can't discriminate.
Right, and so the comment is that we have to have that ability to step outside of it, or we won't be able to discern or discriminate what's going on. And there's actually a list in the Gita, I can't remember all of it, where, you know, from passion comes anger, and from anger a loss of memory, and from a loss of memory loss of discrimination, and he says, and from loss of discrimination, loss of all. If you can't figure out what's what, you're, you know, completely at sea. Discrimination is absolutely one of the first steps, and as you said yourself, to be able to step outside and to see it from another point of view outside the box is going to help us gradually expand our perspective, which is what we're trying to do.
Are we going to have a little break now and then continue with our study of the Bhagavad Gita?
Yes, okay, so our time is up. Thank you so much. And we'll continue our study. We have a study class on the Bhagavad Gita. Hope you can make it here in person sometime. Thank you so much. And does anybody have a program? What's next week? Next week is the Antaskarana Bridge, which is also the bridge between the lower and the higher mind. So it'll follow right on this topic.